The soft clink of a spoon against porcelain echoed in the sunlit kitchen, but Zariah Miller barely registered it. Her eyes were lost in the swirl of cream dissolving into her coffee. Chicago mornings had a rhythm, cars honking in the distance, footsteps on pavement, the subtle whir of life unfolding just beyond her window. But today, everything felt unnervingly still. She glanced at her phone. Still no reply from Trent. She wasn't the clingy type. Years as a journalist taught her to respect space and value silence. But something about this silence felt loaded. The past 6 months with Trent Holloway had been nothing short of a fairy tale. A man with a silver tongue and golden ambition had swept her off her feet with all the ease of a man who had done it before. But he had done it differently with her. Hadn't he? Trent made her feel seen, understood, safe. Until last night. Zariah took a slow sip of her coffee, trying to wash away the bitter aftertaste of doubt. The photograph had arrived in an unmarked envelope and had slipped under her apartment door. A glossy 5x7 image. Trent, standing beside a woman, holding her waist, smiling. It could have been innocent. Could have. But what gnawed at her wasn't the pose, it was the date printed in the corner. 4 weeks ago. Trent had told her he was in LA for a tech summit that week. Alone. She didn't recognize the woman. Yet there was something familiar. The arch of her cheekbones. The softness of her curls. She looked in a chilling way like Zariah herself. Her thumb hovered over the contact icon on her phone. She could call. She could demand answers. But she'd always promised herself one thing: never beg for clarity. The truth, when necessary, would find its way. And maybe it already had. Downtown bustled like usual, but Zariah walked as if wrapped in glass. Every conversation felt far away. Every sound dulled beneath the throb in her chest. She made her way to the office of the Chicago Voice, where she worked as a featured journalist. Her latest profile on domestic abuse survivors was still trending, but even accolades couldn't pull her from the unease gnawing at her. "Zariah," a voice called from behind. "Jordan Pierce," friendly, charming, and just a little too observant. He handed her a coffee he didn't need to ask for. "You look distracted," he said gently. She offered a half smile. "Rough morning. Want to talk about it?" Zariah shook her head. "I'll be okay." Jordan lingered for a beat too long, then nodded and turned. There had always been something unspoken between them, but Zariah had chosen Trent. Now she wasn't sure if she had chosen him, or if he had chosen her. It was near sunset when she decided to walk home. She needed the air, the distance from the newsroom, from the polite eyes of colleagues who cared, but didn't know how to ask. A sudden screech of tires made her freeze at the crosswalk. A black SUV spun out, swerving toward her. She didn't have time to scream, but someone else did. A blur of motion. Arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her backwards onto the sidewalk, just as the vehicle roared past, missing her by inches. They fell to the ground, her body cushioned by the stranger's arms. Her breath caught. For a second, she couldn't move. "Are you okay?" His voice was deep, steady, and warm like whiskey. Zariah blinked up into eyes the color of rain-soaked denim. Cole Bennett. She would learn his name later, but at that moment, he was just the man who had saved her life. They sat on a bench waiting for the police to arrive. She was trembling. "Do you think it was an accident?" she whispered. Cole hesitated. "Maybe, maybe not. But you should be careful." That wasn't a normal swerve. He didn't say more, but his jaw tightened, a man who had seen danger before. Zariah glanced at his uniform. Firefighter, Station 14. "I'm Zariah," she said softly. Cole nodded. They shook hands. For some reason, the touch felt anchoring. That night, Zariah didn't sleep. Her thoughts chased shadows. The photograph, the SUV, the stranger who wasn't a stranger anymore. She searched for Trent's name online. A business article, a podcast interview, and a news clipping. A mention of his wife, Lena Holloway, deceased, but no obituary, no funeral coverage, just a mention. She clicked on an archived image. It was grainy, but her stomach turned. Lena looked like her. Same hair texture, same eyes, same skin tone. She stared at the photo for a long time. Was it a coincidence? Or something far more chilling? The next morning, Zariah walked into her apartment building and found her sister Tasha sitting on the lobby couch. "What are you doing here?" Zariah asked. Tasha looked up, her expression sharp. "You haven't been answering. I had a bad feeling." Zariah tried to wave her off. "I'm fine. Just tired." "No, you're not. And I think Trent is hiding something." Zariah tensed. "Tasha, I checked his business filings." Her sister continued. "His company is registered under 3 different names. One shares a tax ID with a shell corporation used in fraud investigations 2 years ago." Zariah froze. Tasha always had a nose for legal inconsistencies. She was in law school at the top of her class. Brilliant. Blunt. "I'm not saying he's guilty," Tasha said, "but you need to be careful. You have a pattern, Z. Falling for charm instead of character." Zariah looked away. It hurt because it was true. "I want someone who won't leave," she whispered. Tasha softened. "Then start by not abandoning yourself." That evening, she found herself walking past Station 14. She hadn't intended to, but her feet carried her there as if memory had a GPS. Cole was outside washing one of the trucks. He looked up and smiled, slow and easy. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she replied, surprised at her own voice. "Are you okay?" She hesitated, then with a breath said, "Not really." He nodded and set down the hose. "Then let's talk." They walked to a nearby diner with vinyl booths and bad coffee. But the quiet was lovely, the space to breathe. Cole listened. He didn't interrupt. When she told him about the photo, the SUV Lena, he just watched her eyes steady. When she finished, he sat back. "You're brave, you know," he said. She scoffed. "No, I'm terrified. That's what makes it brave." They shared a silence that wasn't awkward, just full. She looked at him, really looked. The faint scar near his temple, the calluses on his hands. A man shaped by fire, not just literal, but personal. "Did you love her?" she asked suddenly. His eyes darkened. "With everything I had." "Do you still?" He paused. Then quietly, "Grief isn't the absence of love. It's the echo of it." Zariah exhaled. In that moment, she didn't feel quite so alone. The city glimmered in the distance like a mirage of certainty. From the rooftop of her apartment building, Zariah stood with a blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The wind carried the scent of autumn, smoky, wistful, and brittle, like pages in an old book. She couldn't sleep. Again. Somewhere down below, Chicago kept humming. 1,000 stories unfolding, strangers meeting, lovers separating. And she was suspended in the quiet, in between, where truth simmered but refused to boil over. Zariah clutched her phone, but there was still no response from Trent. But this time, she wasn't waiting. She had made a decision earlier that day. Not out of fear, but necessity. She needed answers, and there was only one place they might live: inside the walls of Trent's penthouse. The key he had given her weeks ago still worked. Zariah stepped into the silent opulence of his world, Black marble floors, cold chrome fixtures, and a distinct absence of warmth. Trent's apartment had always made her feel like a guest, not a partner. She saw now that it was deliberate. The photo with the unknown woman had been left in her purse. It was a calculated message. Someone wanted her to see it, someone who knew. She moved quickly, methodically. Top drawer in his office. Nothing but cufflinks and sleek pens. Second drawer. Empty. She hesitated at the bookshelf. Too pristine. She ran her fingers along the spines until one stuck out just slightly. She pulled. Click. A panel near the bottom of the shelf gave way. Inside a box. Wooden locked. But it wasn't the box that made her gasp. It was the photographs beneath it. Multiple women. Different faces. Same eyes. Same hair. Same skin tone. Exact eerie resemblance to Lena. To Zariah, she stumbled back, bile rising in her throat. Trent hadn't just chosen her. He had curated her. Zariah barely remembered leaving. She knew only that she had walked straight to the firehouse. Something inside her had broken, and there was only one person she could imagine holding the pieces. Cole answered the door before she knocked. "Hey," he said, voice soft. "You okay?" She stepped forward and collapsed into him. He held her like he'd done it 100 times before, and maybe in another life he had. The kitchen at Station 14 was warm and filled with coffee and cinnamon. One of the other firefighters, a woman named Dre, offered Zariah a plate of muffins. Zariah took one hand, still shaking slightly. Cole sat across from her, waiting. "Patient. I went to Trent's," she began, her voice thin. "I found something." She told him about the photos, the hidden box, the unsettling sense of being replicated. "It's like he wasn't just dating me," she said. "He was designing me." Cole's jaw flexed, but he didn't interrupt. When she finished, he leaned forward. "Do you want to go to the police?" Zariah hesitated. "Not yet. Not without something concrete." "He's too careful." Cole nodded. "Then we'll be careful too. You won't face this alone." Later that night, Zariah couldn't sleep. Cole had insisted she stay in the guest room at his mother's house. Ba Agatha welcomed her like an old friend, offering tea and silence in equal measure. As she lay in bed, Zariah repeatedly replayed the image of the woman in her mind. How many were there? How many had left? How many couldn't? The next morning, Tasha showed up at the firehouse, face flushed with urgency. "Z," she said, waving a folder. "I found something." Inside were financial records. Transfers between Trent's companies. A shared account with a name Zariah didn't recognize. Sophia Hale, Tasha said. "She died 3 years ago. Hit and run." But guess what? Zariah's heart pounded. "She looks just like you, same pattern." Another name. Another woman. A pattern of obsession, maybe worse. Cole glanced at the file. "We need someone who can dig deeper." Tasha smirked, already on it. "There's a detective I interned for last year. Marcus Lee. Smart. Paranoid. Perfect combo." Zariah exhaled. For the first time in days, she felt something other than fear. She felt momentum. Marcus Lee met them at a quiet diner near the harbor. A man in his early 40s, he wore his cynicism like a coat. He listened as Zariah laid everything out. Photos, files, names. He said nothing for a while, then leaned back with a low whistle. "I looked into Trent Holloway a few years ago," he said. "A neighbor reported a domestic disturbance. Filed, then withdrawn. Lena Holloway disappeared shortly after. But Trent had alibis. Money makes evidence bend." He opened his tablet. "But you, Miss Miller, might be his first mistake because you're asking the right questions." Zariah gripped her coffee mug. "So what now? Now we gather everything. If he is what you think he is, we'll find out. Just be careful. Men like him don't implode, they explode." That night, Zaraya returned to her apartment, only long enough to pack a bag. She didn't tell Trent, didn't leave a note, but she did take the photo with her, and the flash drive Tasha had given her. She glanced once around the apartment that had once felt like a sanctuary. Then she locked the door and walked away, toward a life that felt fragile, uncertain, but hers. And in the quiet distance between one breath and the next, she realized she wasn't just surviving, she was preparing to fight. Rain had a way of turning Chicago into a mirror. Every slick pavement, every glistening window pane threw back distorted versions of the world. As Zaraya walked under the shelter of her umbrella, she couldn't shake the sense that she too was nothing more than a reflection crafted, copied, curated. By Trent. By fate. By something larger than she dared name. Cole had walked her home after their meeting with Detective Lee. The street lamps carved out soft halos in the mist, and though the silence between them was easy, it carried an undercurrent of unspoken worry. He hadn't said much, but the way he walked half a step behind her protective steady was its own language. "Do you want me to stay?" he asked when they reached her building. His voice was low, like a question meant for her alone, not the world around them. Zaraya hesitated. "No, but thank you." Her heart said yes. Her pride said no. And her fear whispered both. Inside her apartment, shadows gathered at the corners like eavesdroppers. She set her umbrella aside, locked the door twice, then placed her bag on the counter. Face down, the photo still lay inside as if hiding from her. She resisted the urge to flip it over. Instead, she poured herself a glass of water, her mind tracing Marcus Lee's warning. Men like him don't implode. They explode. Zaraya's phone buzzed a message. From Trent. "Dinner tomorrow. Just us. I miss you." Her throat tightened. He hadn't reached out in days yet. Here he was, simple, smooth, as if nothing were amiss. She stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then with deliberate calm she typed back, "Yes." The following evening, Trent was charm personified. The restaurant gleamed with crystal chandeliers, violins playing softly in the background. He kissed her cheek, ordered her favorite wine without asking, and spoke of business expansions with that easy eloquence that made others lean in. But Zaraya leaned back, observing. His hands moved too gracefully, his smile a little too polished. And when she laughed at something half-heartedly, his eyes sharpened, assessing, as if her reactions were lines on a script he needed her to read correctly. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone honeyed, but lined with steel. "Just tired," she replied, her fork steady against her plate. He reached across the table, brushing her wrist with his thumb. The contact sent a chill down her arm, not from warmth, but possession. Hours later, Zaraya stood at her bathroom mirror, wiping away her makeup. For a split second, she swore the reflection staring back wasn't hers. Her breath caught. Same eyes, same mouth, but the face felt older, sadder, a stranger's reflection. The photo haunted her. Lena's ghost pressed against her mind until she finally surrendered. She retrieved the envelope from her purse and pulled out the picture again. It wasn't just a resemblance. The woman looked nearly identical to her. The curve of the jawline, the tilt of the smile, as if Trent had sought a duplicate and chosen her. Zaraya dropped the photo onto the counter and pressed trembling hands to her face. What if she were nothing more than a stand-in for a woman who was never meant to leave? The next morning, she met Tasha at a quiet cafe near campus. Tasha's sharp eyes softened when she saw her sister's pale face. "Did you meet him?" Zaraya nodded. "He was perfect." Tasha frowned. "That's not comforting." "I know." Zaraya told her about the mirror, the photograph, the eerie resemblance. Tasha listened, her pen tapping against her notebook. Finally, she said, Then it's time we stop guessing and start digging. I'll subpoena some old records through my contacts, such as Lena's medical files if I can. Maybe police reports too. Zariah's heart swelled with gratitude. You shouldn't risk that, Tash. Her sister leaned forward, eyes fierce. You're my only family. That's risk enough. Later that day, Cole found Zariah on the steps of the firehouse. She had come without calling, unsure of why, only that her chest felt tight, and she couldn't bear silence alone. He handed her a cup of coffee. No words were exchanged. They sat side by side, steam rising between them. At last, Zariah whispered, "He kissed my wrist last night." It felt like ownership, not affection. Cole's jaw clenched. You don't belong to him. I keep telling myself that. But what if he doesn't believe it? Cole turned to her, his eyes steady. Then I'll remind him. The words landed heavy, carrying more than protection. Something more profound. Something that dared to cross the fragile line between them. That night, a knock echoed at Zariah's door. She opened it to find an envelope on the ground. No address. No sender. Inside, another photograph. Not Trent this time. Her. Sleeping. Zariah's breath hitched. The picture was recent. Her hair in the braid she'd worn just last night. Her body stiffened with the realization someone had been in her apartment. She dialed Cole before she could think. He arrived within minutes, storming through the door, with the precision of a man trained by fire and fear alike. He checked every room, every lock. Nothing. But when he returned to the living room, he found her frozen, the photo clutched in her trembling hand. Zariah, he said gently, crouching before her. Look at me. Her eyes lifted, drowning. I think I'm losing myself. Cole reached out, covering her shaking fingers with his own. You're not lost. You're here with me. Days blurred. Marcus Lee uncovered fragments of reports suggesting Lena Holloway's disappearance wasn't voluntary. Neighbors recalled screaming a single broken lamp. A withdrawal from Lena's bank account was made by someone who wasn't her. But evidence remained circumstantial. Trent's wealth insulated him. His charm disarmed critics. And now Zariah was left to live with a haunting suspicion she was walking into the same trap Lena hadn't escaped. One evening, after hours of silence, she asked Cole, Do you ever regret saving people when you run into fires knowing you might burn? He studied her. I regret the ones I couldn't save. Never the ones I could. Her throat tightened. What if I'm already burning? Then let me carry you out. The storm broke the following week. Zariah returned home from work to find her apartment door ajar. She froze, every instinct screaming. Slowly she stepped inside. Nothing seemed stolen. Nothing seemed broken. Until she reached her bedroom. On the bed lay a red dress. Expensive. Elegant. Not hers. And beside it, a note in Trent's handwriting. Wear this. Tomorrow. I have plans for us. Her pulse thundered. She hadn't told him she was back in her apartment. She hadn't told him anything at all. A stranger's reflection stared at her from the mirror again, eyes wide with dread. And in that moment, Zariah understood. This wasn't just love twisted into control. It was an obsession sculpted into danger. And she had already stepped too far inside its fire. Night descended like a velvet curtain, muffling the restless pulse of the city. From her apartment window, Zariah watched headlights streak across wet asphalt, each beam of light gone too quickly, dissolving into darkness. She felt the same, like a fleeting moment in a play, scripted by someone else. Every step she took seemed observed, catalogued, staged. And Trent's presence loomed invisible, yet suffocating. The red dress still lay folded on her bed, untouched. Its silk shimmered under the lamplight, like the skin of some exotic predator. Zariah had tried to shove it back into the box, but each time her gaze returned, it seemed to mock her resolve. Her phone buzzed. Trent again. Tomorrow at 7. Don't be late. No warmth. No questions. Just expectation. Zariah left her apartment an hour later, unable to bear its silence. She walked toward the firehouse as though her body carried memory deeper than thought. The night air clung to her sharp and metallic. Every step echoed with paranoia. She had the sinking sense of being followed. Halfway down the block, she turned. A man stood under a lamppost, half hidden in shadow. Too far to make out his face. Too still to be casual. Her breath caught. She quickened her pace, and when she looked again, he was gone. Cole met her at the door. His eyes softened at the sight of her, but his shoulders tightened when he noticed her trembling. "What happened?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted, but someone was there, watching. Without hesitation, he pulled her inside, the weight of his hand steady on her back. The firehouse kitchen smelled faintly of smoke and soap. Warmth radiated from the walls from him. For a moment, she let herself believe she could be safe. "Stay here tonight," he urged. "You shouldn't be alone." Zariah hesitated, pride prickling. But when she looked into his eyes, honest, unyielding, she whispered, "Okay." But Agatha welcomed her like family, pressing a cup of chamomile tea into her hands. She didn't ask questions, only said, "When fire comes too close, child, you don't fight it alone. You let others hold the line." The words wrapped around Zariah's heart, loosening something tight. She excused herself to the guest room, but Cole lingered by the doorway. "If you need anything," he said softly, "I'll be outside." Her voice trembled when she answered, "I know." For the first time in weeks, she slept. Not dreamlessly, but deeply enough to feel her body remember what rest was. Morning brought a fragile light. Over breakfast, Tasha burst in with a stack of papers clutched to her chest. Her eyes were bright with adrenaline. "Z, you need to see this." Zariah and Cole leaned over the table as Tasha spread out old police reports and property records. At the center was Lena Holloway's name. "She didn't just vanish," Tasha said, voice sharp. "There were 911 calls from neighbors 2 days before she disappeared. Screaming. A woman's voice. Then silence." Cole frowned. And nothing came of it. Not officially. The calls were logged, but the report was closed. Lena's body was never found. No autopsy. Nothing. Zariah's chest constricted, so she could still be alive. Tasha shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe Trent made sure she'd never be found. The room fell silent. The possibilities hung heavy. Later that day, Detective Marcus Lee called. His voice was terse. "I've got something. Meet me at the docks. Bring only those whom you trust." The message carried urgency, but also unease. Zariah looked at Cole and Tasha. They all knew this was no longer just a game of suspicion. It was a descent into danger. The docks were nearly deserted, the lake, a restless sheet of black glass. Marcus waited near a warehouse, his trench coat pulled tight against the wind. When they approached, he handed Zariah a thin file. "Financial ties," he explained. "Trent's companies funnel money through offshore accounts. One of those accounts paid the lease on a property under a different name." Guess where Zariah flipped the page? Her stomach dropped. It was an address less than 3 miles from her apartment. "Someone's been living there," Marcus added grimly. "Utilities active. Deliveries made." Cole narrowed his eyes. "Lena. Or someone else," Marcus said. "Either way, it's tied to him." They approached the house the following evening. A nondescript townhouse on a quiet street. Curtains drawn tight. Cole insisted on going first, his protective instincts bristling. Zariah followed, heart hammering. The door was locked. Marcus picked it with a speed that hinted at experience he didn't elaborate on. Inside smelled of dust and lavender. Furniture covered in sheets, silence thick as wool. Then from upstairs, a creak. Zariah froze. Cole motioned for silence and ascended the staircase, every step calculated. Zariah followed, unwilling to stay behind. At the end of the hall, a door stood ajar. A faint glow spilled out. Cole pushed it open. The room inside was lined with photographs, dozens of them. Some were pinned to corkboards, others taped to the walls, all of Zariah. She was laughing at the cafe. She was walking home from work. She's sleeping. Zariah staggered back, bile rising in her throat. Oh, God. Cole steadied her, but his own face was taut with rage. And then a voice broke the silence. You shouldn't be here. They spun around. In the doorway stood a woman, pale, fragile, with hair falling in waves across her face. Her eyes locked on Zariah's. It was like staring into a mirror distorted by time. Lena. Zariah whispered. The woman's lips curved, trembling. He'll come for us both. In that instant, Zariah understood the depth of Trent's obsession. She was not just a replacement. She was the continuation of a story that had never ended. And now that story had found them. The revelation of Lena's presence hung between them like the edge of a blade. Zariah could hardly breathe as she stared at the woman who mirrored her face, yet carried the weight of years vanished into shadows. Lena's eyes darted nervously toward the window, expecting Trent to materialize from the darkness outside. Cole stepped forward, protective by instinct, slightly ahead of Zariah. You're safe now, he said firmly. But even as he spoke, the room quivered with doubt. Safety was a fragile word in Trent Holloway's world. Lena shook her head. No one's safe, not while he's watching. He doesn't let go, not ever. Her voice cracked on the last word, trembling with a memory only she knew. Zariah reached out slowly, her hand hovering before finally settling on Lena's arm. You don't have to run anymore. We'll help you. The touch startled Lena, but she didn't pull away. Instead, tears welled in her eyes. He made me disappear once. Don't let him do it to you too. That night, Marcus Lee insisted on relocating Lena to a safe house. The detective's grim expression made it clear what they'd uncovered wasn't merely an obsession. It was preparation. Trent wasn't improvising. He was orchestrating. Zariah sat in the back of Cole's truck, the engine hum masking her restless heartbeat. Beside her, Lena was silent, staring out the window with hollow eyes. In the front seat, Cole drove with steady hands, his presence a quiet anchor against the storm. When they finally arrived at Agatha's house, a place Marcus deemed more reliable than any anonymous safe house, Agatha welcomed Lena without hesitation. She clasped Lena's hands as though she were a long-lost daughter. The fire can scorch, child, she said softly, but sometimes the embers are what help us find our way. Zariah watched the exchange with a lump in her throat. Agatha had a way of making broken people believe they were whole again. And at that moment, Zariah wanted to consider too. Later, when the others slept, Zariah wandered onto the porch. The night was still, but every creak of the old wood beneath her feet reminded her of footsteps that might follow. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to keep the cold from sinking too deep. Cole joined her quietly, his steps familiar now, grounding. He offered her a blanket, draping it over her shoulders, before leaning against the railing beside her. You don't have to carry all of this alone, he murmured. Zariah's throat tightened. I feel like my life stopped belonging to me when I met Trent. Like I became a character in his story. Not mine. Cole turned toward her, his eyes reflecting the faint glow of the porch light. Then, let's rewrite it. The words lingered tender and daring. Zariah felt the fragile pull between them, stretched thin like a thread ready to snap or weave something new. She swallowed her voice, barely a whisper. You make it sound easy. Not easy, he said, but worth it. Their eyes locked, and the world fell away. She leaned forward, cautious, uncertain, until the space between them dissolved. The kiss was not urgent, but reverent, the kind that acknowledged wounds while daring to believe in healing. When they parted, her breath trembled against his. Thank you, she whispered. It was not for the kiss, but for reminding her she could still feel like herself. The fragile peace was shattered the following evening. Zariah returned to her apartment with Cole determined to collect the last of her belongings. The red dress was still there, but no longer felt like silk. It felt like a shroud. She stuffed it into a bag, refusing to leave Trent's silent threat behind. As they prepared to leave, Cole noticed the balcony door ajar. His instincts sharpened instantly. He gestured for Zariah to stay back, but she followed him into the dimly lit living room. The glass doors rattled in the wind, but it wasn't the wind that made Zariah's breath still. On the coffee table lay another photograph. Her, with Cole. Taken just last night on the porch of Agatha's house. Zariah's knees weakened. He knows, she whispered. He knows where we are. Cole clenched his fists, fury darkening his calm. Then he's closer than we thought. They didn't return to Agatha's that night. Marcus insisted they stay at a secure hotel under assumed names. Lena had been moved separately, and her safety was now paramount. Yet even in the anonymity of a new room, Zariah couldn't shake the sense of eyes pressing against her back. At dawn, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She answered before Cole could stop her. Trent's voice poured through the line, smooth, amused, deadly. Red looks beautiful on you, Zariah, but you wear fear even better. Her hand trembled so violently that Cole gently pried the phone from her grasp, his face taut with rage. If you come near her again... Trent's laugh sliced through the line before the call ended abruptly. Zariah collapsed into Cole's chest, heart racing. He's everywhere. No, Cole whispered into her hair. He wants you to believe that. But he bleeds like any man, and we'll prove it. That evening, Marcus arrived with urgent news. Trent's making moves. I intercepted communication suggesting he plans to host a gala this weekend. His so-called business associates will be there, but more importantly, it's where he hides in plain sight, surrounded, adored, untouchable. Zariah's pulse quickened. You think Lena should go? Marcus shook his head. No. But you. He'll expect you. He wants you at his side. And that may be the only way to expose him. Cole stiffened. Absolutely not. She's not bait. Zariah lifted her chin, fear and resolve colliding in her chest. Maybe I am. I'll play his game if it gets us closer to the truth. But only if you're there too. Cole's eyes burned with conflict. Protecting her meant shielding her from the fire. But sometimes the only way out was through. That night, in the silence of the hotel room, Zariah sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the scar on Cole's temple. She reached out, brushing it gently with her fingertips. How did it happen? She asked softly. He caught her hand, holding it against his skin. A fire. Years ago. I tried to save someone, but I couldn't. It stayed with me. Her chest ached. And yet you keep saving people. His gaze deepened. Because one day, I hope to save the right one. The air thickened, filled with a tenderness that frightened her more than Trent's threats. Because here in Cole's steadiness, she glimpsed the life she'd always craved, but never dared to claim. She leaned in again, not out of fear or desperation, but choice. And when his lips met hers this time, it wasn't survival. It was beginning. The next morning, Zariah stood before the mirror. Her reflection stared back not Trent's curated fantasy, not Lena's haunting double. Just her, Zariah Miller, a woman who had been used, manipulated, and nearly broken, but not destroyed. For the first time in years, she whispered to her reflection, "I am mine." And in the quiet echo of those words, she found the courage to face what came next. The red dress lay across the hotel bed like a dare. Under the soft morning light, its silk gleamed with a deceptive innocence, the kind of thing one might wear to be admired, not devoured. Zariah stared at it for a long time, feeling its weight even from a distance. She had sworn not to let Trent script her again. And yet the dress had become a choice: fear or strategy, prison or proof. She chose a strategy. With a seam ripper borrowed from the concierge and trembling meticulous fingers, she loosened the lining just enough to slide in the thin microphone Marcus had dropped off with a curt nod and a warning to breathe. A gold hairpin, Agatha's old keepsake, hid the earpiece snug against her ear. Agatha's warm and steady hands lingered at her temples when she placed the pin. "Beauty is not submission," the older woman murmured, fastening the clasp. "Wear it like armor." Zariah managed a smile that didn't quite meet her eyes. "I'll try." Cole's reflection appeared in the mirror behind her shoulder. He had traded his uniform for a tailored black suit, the elegance that didn't announce itself. The scar at his temple caught the light and then disappeared. He wasn't built for masquerades, but would walk into one for her anyway. "Are you ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." He moved closer, his fingers finding the pearl button at the nape of her neck. There was no urgency in his touch, only care. "You don't owe him compliance," he said softly. "You owe yourself the truth." Zariah swallowed past the aching knot in her throat. "Tonight we take something back." The Holloway Foundation Gala was held in a glass museum that rose from the lakeshore like a prism, coaxing jewels from the night. Paper lanterns floated above the entry plaza, diffusing the evening into a dim constellation. Inside, the theme was abundance, white orchids overflowing from crystal vases, marble fountains whispering to polished floors, a string quartet threading silk through the air. The invitation had listed the theme as resurrection. Zariah wondered with a dark twist of irony whose resurrection the night would worship. Trent met her at the top of the staircase, as if the architecture had arranged the moment. He wore a tuxedo that fit like conviction, a mask of courtesy that never seemed to slip. His mouth softened when he saw her, but his eyes did not. They assessed. "Exquisite," he said, lifting her hand to his lips in a gesture that belonged to older centuries. "Red suits your courage." Her smile was even. "You might like it." He signaled to a steward who placed a flute of champagne in her hand. Cole hovered on the far side of the foyer in the discreet livery of event staff, a silver tray balanced in one hand, the formal distance, both protective and cruel. Only Zariah knew the pressure of his palm against the underside of the tray, a Morse code promise. "I'm here." Marcus's voice brushed her ear like a draft audio check. "I have you, Miller. Keep conversation natural. If he leads you to a private space, follow, but do not escalate." "Understood. Understood," she whispered, lips barely moving. Trent guided her into the main hall. A gallery wall declared the evening's headline exhibition in gold, serif letters, House of Echoes. Beneath it, a photograph of a room lined with mirrors, photos within photos, faces within faces. Trent's hand warmed her lower back as they moved. I commissioned this one, he told her. Identity as art. Beauty as perseverance. Zariah let her gaze travel the room. Or beauty as obsession, she said lightly. He chuckled the sound silver. How cynical you've become, darling. Darling. A word with teeth in his mouth. They passed a cluster of donors, each eager to offer Trent a smile he returned like currency. The orchestra shifted to a waltz that made the floor seem to glide. Zariah felt eyes on her, the frank appraisals of strangers, the discreet recognition from familiar faces. She couldn't tell which made her skin crawl more, the admiration or the fact that it was demanded. Dance with me. Trent said, not asking. She did, because she had come to be seen, because tonight stagecraft belonged to her too. On the floor his grip was exacting. To the onlooker, a picture of poise. To her, a theater of control. He guided her steps like a choreographer who resents improvisation. She followed until the song's final measure softened. Then she deliberately missed a beat. His jaw tightened. She smiled. You're distracted, he murmured against her hair. I'm thinking, she replied. About me. She said, I'm thinking about us, letting the pronoun hang like a lure. What we mean and what we perform. His smile sharpened. We mean exactly what we perform. The violin trembled into silence. After the dance, Trent tucked her hand into the crook of his elbow and steered her toward the exhibition entrance. The corridor narrowed into shadow, then opened into a chamber of mirrors. Zariah blinked. The room was a kaleidoscope of selves, a ring of floor-to-ceiling glass, each pane angled to reflect her and multiply her into infinity. Light pulsed from a hidden source, shifting the scene from silver to crimson, to a faint, eerie gold. Her reflection became other versions of her older, younger, braver, afraid. Trent watched the play of faces with quiet satisfaction. He said, We are all of us, a chorus of our past selves. I admire your chorus. Zariah turned slowly. Do you admire my autonomy? Autonomy is a lovely costume, he replied. It makes desire more interesting. Every word was measured to sound like intimacy, but land like a verdict. Zariah curled her fingers into her palm to keep them from shaking. Marcus's voice threaded through the static. Stay with him. See if he offers you a tour of the private collection. We need the office, not the art. Trent said that the private gallery is this way, as if cued. He led her down a velvet-lined hall and opened a door that clicked behind them, with a lock calibrated to feel accidental. The room beyond was spare in a way that cost a fortune, lacquered ebony shelves, a single abstract painting that resembled a heart, unspooled into geometry. In this bar cart, crystal decanters caught the light, like throat-cleared confessions. He poured her bourbon without asking. She didn't drink it. You've been distant, he observed. Is this about Los Angeles? Her pulse faltered. She didn't betray it. Should it be Trent considered her? Then set his glass down with careful precision. I value loyalty. If I've failed to make you feel secure, that's my failing. I'm failing. The language of atonement draped over the architecture of control. Zariah tilted her head, feigning softness. You could reassure me now. How? Please tell me what you're hiding. He chuckled without mirth. Everyone hides, Zariah, even you. Her earpiece crackled. Marcus again has a safe a far wall on the right side of the painting. Numbers may be on his watch or cufflink, watch his left hand. Zariah let the silence lengthen until it became a thin wire stretched between them. Then she approached the painting, tracing the ragged lines with her eyes. It looks like a heart broken into directions, she said. Trent stepped behind her. his breath a whisper. All hearts are maps when they're helpful. He touched the frame. Zariah caught the reflection of his wrist in the polished glass, a watch face bright with a blinking second hand, a series of etched digits along the rim. 4 numbers repeated in a pattern. Her chest answered with a steady drum. Remember. A knock at the door saved her from inventing a reason to step away. It was a waiter with the wrong kind of posture. Cole. He kept his gaze lowered, the livery jacket folding him into anonymity. Pardon me, sir, he said, unobtrusive. Dessert is being served in 5. Trent glanced at him without interest. Thank you. Cole nodded and retreated, but not before Zariah saw the briefest flick of his eyes to her hands, checking for tremor pain for anything that spelled danger. She let her fingers relax against her side until the message carried, I'm all right. Stay, Trent said, reclaiming her attention. Let them eat cake. The door clicked again. Privacy was a habit with him. Please tell me what you want, he said. Zariah turned a promise. He raised a brow. Of what? That I'm not a replica, she whispered. I am not the second act of a story you refused to end. For a heartbeat, something like surprise glanced across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by the polished surface of certainty. You're my constant, he said. The rest is noise. A chill lifted the hairs along her arms. He didn't need to believe what he said. He only needed her to react as if she did. He returned her to the main hall, as though nothing had shifted. Yet everything had. The orchestra had now given way to a jazz trio, the air buzzing with soft laughter and glass chiming like distant bells. She spotted Tasha near a floral arch, speaking with a city councilwoman, her expression composed enough to mask the crackling nerve beneath. Marcus hovered at the perimeter, the picture of a man pretending to enjoy a party while counting exits. Zariah moved among the guests, with Trent's arm draped casually at her waist, collecting glances and greetings like errant petals. Through her earpiece, Marcus counted under his breath. 30 minutes until the pledge. After that, he moves to the quiet room to sign donor agreements. We need those papers. Cole, be ready. She let Trent lead. It was the safer illusion. But when he excused himself to greet a senator, Zariah slipped toward the side corridor, acting as if curiosity were a personality trait rather than a mission. She found the quiet room easily a study, draped in muted green, designed for persuasion over cigars. Cole was there before her, as if summoned from the shadows. He caught her hand and pressed it to his chest, his heartbeat fierce and resolute. You're doing beautifully, he murmured. I don't feel beautiful. That's not what I meant. He kissed her knuckles swift like a secret, and released her only when footsteps approached. He vanished again, leaving her with a warmth she tucked behind her ribs like a talisman. Trent entered with 2 men in suits that fit like silence. Papers were laid out, pledges, contracts, numbers that smelled like smoke even through the crisp scent of paper. Zariah lingered at a Globe bar cart, eyes down, presence inconspicuous. Her mic caught every syllable. Marcus's soft yeses braided into her spine. The men spoke of routes for philanthropy that sounded suspiciously like exits for liquid assets. It wasn't the scandal of cruelty. It was the scandal of precision. Trent signed with his left hand. The watch flashed again, the numbers she memorized from the mirror's reflection. When the men left, she moved toward the painting above the fireplace, a serene landscape that felt like an alibi. Do you like it? Trent asked from behind her. I prefer art that bleeds, she said. You always were sentimental. His voice lowered. Be careful tonight, Zariah. Some wolves play at charity, and shepherds who breed them, she replied. A shadow crossed the doorway. Jordan. He wore a tuxedo and a smile that only half reached his eyes. Zariah, he drawled. You look formidable. Her stomach dipped. "Jordan, what are you doing here?" "Invited," he said smoothly, nodding toward Trent. "Mr. Holloway is a generous patron of the arts. And journalism." The room chilled. Marcus's voice was a wire in her ear. "Do not engage. Get out. Now." But Trent's hand landed lightly on her back, a leash disguised as intimacy. "Stay," he said. "Join us." Jordan's gaze flicked toward her fondness guilt. Something else. He lifted a champagne flute to reinvention. In the clink of crystal, Zariah heard the snap of trap springs. She excused herself moments later, claiming the powder room, and slipped down the hall instead. The numbers from the watch burned bright in her mind. She returned to the private gallery, heart thundering loud enough for the microphone to censor its tremor. At the far wall, she pressed her palm to the cool lacquer beside the painting and whispered the sequence. A panel slid open. Inside a safe blinked awake a keyless slit waiting for affirmation. She entered the numbers again. The safe sighed. Folders, drives, photos, and a velvet box. Zariah opened it with hands that refused to obey her calm. Inside lay a necklace. Simple. Gold. She'd seen it before. Not on herself. On the woman in the photograph from the envelope. Her double. A click behind her. She turned. Trent stood in the doorway, the kind of smile that precedes a storm. Behind him, Jordan lingered like a shadow that had learned to speak. "Curiosity is a beautiful vice," Trent said. "It makes the intelligence so predictable." Zariah closed the box, pulse steadying into a clarity she hadn't anticipated. "Then you should have predicted this," she replied, voice low. "You should have predicted that I would stop being your echo." The alarm didn't scream. It whispered, a discreet chime threaded through the speakers. The sound told the right people the wrong person had trespassed. Doors began to lock with soft final clicks. Marcus's voice snapped like static security lockdown. "Zariah, move. Coal extract path B. Stairwell C is open for 90 seconds. Coal answered a steel edge under velvet. "I'm on her." Trent stepped forward unhurried. "Don't make this ugly," he murmured. "You've always been so exquisite when you comply." Zariah lifted her chin. "I'm not your constant." He smiled almost tenderly. "No, darling. You're my catalyst." And somewhere in the museum, a small, controlled explosion thumped like a second heartbeat. The lights flickered. Smoke began to billow along the ceiling. For a split second, Zariah thought she saw a figure in the far mirror, the suggestion of a woman whose face she knew as intimately as her own eyes, fierce and unafraid. Whether it was Lena or the person she would become, Zariah couldn't tell. It didn't matter. She turned and ran toward the door as it hissed open to Cole's hands. He pulled her into motion, into oxygen, into the kind of heat that saved. Behind them, Trent's voice drifted like a benediction. "Run if you like. I make beautiful endings too." The flames had not been real. Only smoke machines activated behind the gallery walls, but the panic had been. The crowd had scattered like marbles on marble heels, clattering voices, shrill. And in the chaos, Zariah and Cole had vanished into the service corridors, led by Marcus's voice, like Ariadne's thread through the labyrinth. Zariah clutched the velvet box to her chest, her lungs heaving from the sprint. The weight of what she'd taken, a necklace, a trove of digital files, maybe her life back, tugged at her more than exhaustion. Beside her, Cole's palm wrapped around her wrist, his touch a steadying force she hadn't known she needed until now. "You're okay," he said, guiding her down another flight of stairs. "We're almost out." But the building wasn't ready to release them. Two men in black suits blocked their path as they turned a corner into the loading bay. Not security, at least not by law. Zariah recognized one of them from the gala, a silent sentinel by Trent's side. Cole stepped in front of her. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he warned. The taller of the two men smiled without warmth. That's a shame. The fight was quick but vicious. Cole dropped the first man with a clean elbow to the jaw. The second pulled a blade, but Zariah, heart in her throat, smashed the velvet box into his face, giving Cole the half-second he needed to pin him against the wall. Blood smeared the polished concrete. They didn't wait to breathe. They ran. Outside, a black SUV screeched into the alley. Marcus was behind the wheel, cursing under his breath. Get in. The doors slammed. Tires peeled. And the museum disappeared behind a wall of fire suppression foam and sirens. Only then did Zariah allow herself to collapse into Cole's side. His arm curled around her protectively, and she let herself lean into him, eyes squeezed shut. "Did we get enough?" she whispered. Cole reached for the necklace she still clutched. It was simple gold worn easily under blouses and scrutiny. He found the clasp too heavy for such a delicate chain and twisted it. Click. The pendant opened. Inside, a hidden microdrive. They drove to a safe house Marcus had arranged, this anonymous one. Not even Tasha knew where it was. A dark little cottage, tucked deep in the woods near Lake Geneva, its silence humming with secrecy. Marcus slid the drive into his laptop. Let's see what the man keeps close to his chest. The screen lit up. Encrypted folders. Dozens of them. But one glowed red, pulsing like a wound. Project Echo. Marcus clicked. A password prompt appeared. Zariah stared, heart thudding. What if it's Lena's name? No. Cole murmured, eyes locked on the screen. Try. HL. Marcus raised an eyebrow, but typed it in. The files opened. Images. Videos. Documents. Dossiers of women. Black biracial with specific bone structures, voice samples, and psychological profiles. Names. Histories. All matched against Lena's biometric data. Zariah covered her mouth. It wasn't just an obsession. It was a replication. Trent hadn't just replaced Lena. He'd designed successors. And worse, Zariah saw a photo of herself. Dated before she'd ever met Trent. He'd picked her long before she thought she chose him. In another folder, a file labeled Hannah Lou Bennett. Cole froze. He opened the file. Zariah watched his face as blood drained from it. Her name, her autopsy, her fire. The cause of death had been ruled accidental. But here was a memo encrypted but decrypted now. Subject HL neutralized after uncooperative behavior. Cleanup staged as a domestic fire. Related asset CB, terminated from surveillance. Zariah felt her body go cold. Cole. He didn't look at her. He killed her. She reached for him. He stepped back. Outside, snow had begun to fall soft as ash. Inside, silence reigned. Zariah stood in the hallway staring at the window, unsure what to say. Cole joined her shoulders tense. I was married to her, he said at last. Hannah. She was everything good I ever touched. Zariah waited. She volunteered at shelters, painted ugly things beautifully. She used to say I was made of brick and smoke and she didn't mind the soot. Zariah touched his arm. She saw what I see. He turned to her slowly. I didn't know Trent then. I never knew his name. But he knew mine. He was watching long before I knew someone was hunting. Her breath caught. You weren't collateral. You were a rehearsal. Cole nodded. And now he's circling for the final act. They didn't sleep that night. Instead, they cataloged files, printed duplicates, and backed up drives. Zariah's hands shook, but her voice didn't. She recorded a statement for the press, a preemptive strike, in case anything happened to her. My name is Zariah Miller, and if you're hearing this, Trent Holloway has tried to write my ending. But I'm not a paragraph in his manifesto. I'm the footnote that exposes everything. At dawn, a package arrived. No return address, no courier. Inside, a single photo. Tasha, bound, gagged, bruised, and a note, "Come alone, or she burns." Her own hands muffled Zariah's scream. Cole grabbed the photo, eyes blazing. Marcus was already on the phone, calling in favors he wasn't supposed to have. But Zariah stood frozen. Not again. Not another woman stolen by a man who believed beauty belonged in cages. That night, Zariah dressed in black. Cole blocked the door. "No." Zariah looked at him, eyes wet but resolute. "She's my sister. She's my family too," he said. "We don't do this without a plan." Zariah shook her head. "He won't wait." Behind them, Lena stepped forward. "I know where he's keeping her," she said, "because it's where he kept me." Everyone turned. She held up a key. "And I know how to get in." The wind moaned like an omen. Lena stood by the map, splayed across Marcus's desk, her fingers hovering above a red-circled warehouse near the river's edge. Her face was calm, but Zariah recognized the weight behind her silence, the memory of walls that once whispered, chains that clinked in rhythm with breath. Trauma turned cartographer. "That's the place," Lena said. "It looks abandoned." "It isn't." Cole leaned forward, scanning the blueprint Marcus had pulled from municipal records. No cameras on the exterior. "That's intentional." Marcus added that Trent's always used layers front companies' shell spaces and legal facades. This warehouse is owned by a private trust linked to one of his tech ventures. Zariah's heart thudded. "That's where he's keeping her." Lena nodded. "It's where he kept me." Below ground. Soundproofed and locked from the outside. Zariah's hands balled into fists. "Then that's where we end this." They left before dawn. Zariah sat in the back of the SUV, eyes fixed on the gray horizon. Lena rode beside her, wrapped in a borrowed coat, lips pressed into a line. Cole and Marcus took the front seats. Their conversation clipped tactical. The warehouse rose from the fog like a rusted cathedral. Ivy clawed up its spine, windows blacked out with a precision that dared curiosity. There were no guards visible. But the silence was too complete. It felt staged. "This is a trap," Marcus muttered. Lena turned. "Of course it is, but that doesn't mean it isn't real." Zariah stepped out first, her boots crunching gravel. She clutched a backpack to her side. The drive, the documents, the truth, all zipped inside. But it was Tasha she carried in her chest. Cole touched her arm. "We go in together. No matter what happens, you stay with me." She nodded. "Only if you promise the same." He didn't smile, but his grip on her hand was answer enough. Inside, the air was thick with dust and secrets. They moved in silence, guided by Lena's memory. Down rusted staircases, past crates filled with outdated tech equipment and staged debris. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Lena stopped at a wall that looked solid. She reached beneath an exposed pipe and pressed a hidden switch. A wall section groaned and slid aside, revealing a narrow corridor lit by dim red bulbs. "That's new," she whispered. "He didn't have that when I escaped." Zariah stepped through first. The hallway opened into a chamber lined with glass. And inside, sitting bound to a chair, was Tasha. Zariah's cry cracked the air. "Tasha." Her sister looked up, bruised but conscious. Relief flooded her eyes, then panic. She shook her head. "No, no, no." Zariah froze. Then she heard the door close behind her. The glass walls darkened, sealing her inside. Zariah ran to Tasha, her hands reaching for the restraints, but there were no locks, only magnetic seals. Outside the glass, Trent emerged from the shadows. elegantly dressed, calm, triumphant. "Welcome home," he said. Cole pounded on the exterior. Marcus beside him, guns drawn. But the room was isolated, soundproofed. They couldn't hear her scream. Zariah turned to face him. "Let her go." Trent stepped closer, hands clasped behind his back. "You came back, Zariah. I knew you would. You always circle back to the beginning. This isn't the beginning. It's the reckoning." He tilted his head. "You're shaking." "I'm furious." Trent glanced at Tasha. "She's lovely, spirited. Reminds me of you before you learned obedience." Zariah took a step forward. "You think control is love. You think replication is possession. But all you've ever done is destroy what you touch." Trent's smile faded. "I made you. Every choice. Every step." "No," she whispered. "You only followed me." In the control room, Marcus worked furiously to override the system. Lena stood behind him, her hand trembling as she read the passcodes. "Here," she said. "Try 0803. That's the date he branded onto the files. It's his birth code." Marcus typed. The glass flickered. "Give me 5 seconds," he said. "Then kick in the left wall. It's weakest." Cole nodded and raised his shoulder. Inside, Trent circled Zariah. "Tell me, what would you give for her? Would you trade yourself?" Zariah stepped in front of Tasha. "I'd give you what you fear most, irrelevance." The lights flickered. Trent's head snapped toward the ceiling. "What have you done?" Zariah smiled. "I stopped being your echo." With a crash, Cole burst through the glass. Smoke followed. Screams. Zariah grabbed Tasha, shielding her as Marcus flung open the last lock. Trent lunged, fury uncoiled. Cole met him in the middle, fists crashing. It wasn't a fight. It was a purge, fire against fire. Zariah pulled Tasha toward the corridor. "Run," behind them. Metal groaned. Sparks flew. Sirens howled. And then a fire ignited. The escape was chaos. Tasha stumbled, but Lena caught her. Marcus guided them up the stairs, shouting coordinates into his radio. Zariah turned once to see Cole still inside, dragging Trent back from the blaze. "Leave him," she cried. Cole shook his head. "Not yet." He slammed Trent into the wall, knocking him unconscious. Then he ran. They emerged into morning light, lungs gasping, clothes scorched. Behind them, the warehouse roared. Flames danced high, devouring the past. Paramedics arrived. Police swarmed. The press began circling, drawn by the scent of a no longer buried story. Zariah sat beside Tasha, gripping her hand. "I thought I lost you," she said. Tasha squeezed back. "You didn't. You never will." Cole joined them. His face soot-streaked, his knuckles raw. Zariah stood and threw herself into his arms. "I thought I'd lose you too." He held her close. "You won't." She buried her face in his chest. "Not even to the fire." "No," he whispered. "Because this time we burned it down first." The fire had been extinguished. But in the days that followed, the silence seared deeper. Zariah sat in a quiet hospital corridor, the scent of antiseptic and wilted flowers mingling around her. Tasha rested inside the room, asleep. At last, her injuries mostly superficial, but her spirit frayed. Cole had refused treatment until she was safe. Now he sat across from Zariah, his hand wrapped in gauze, his eyes shadowed but steady. Zariah exhaled slowly. "I thought I'd feel victorious." Cole leaned forward. "But..." She looked down at her hands. "All I feel is exhausted." He nodded. "That's how you know it was real." Outside the window, reporters camped like moths to flame. The explosion at the warehouse had made national news. Speculation ran rampant. The truth, however, remained locked behind sealed testimonies and encrypted drives. Until now. Zariah stood before a podium at a downtown press conference arranged by Marcus and a select group of federal agents. Her story had been vetted, cross-checked, and backed with documentation files and Lena's official sworn testimony. Still, her legs trembled beneath her tailored coat when she stepped into the lights. She looked at the crowd. Journalists, law enforcement, survivors, strangers. "My name is Zariah Miller." She began, voice soft but unwavering. "I was manipulated, watched, chosen, and nearly destroyed by Trent Holloway, a man many of you admired. But admiration means nothing when truth is devoured in silence." Gasps fluttered through the room. She took a breath. "I stand here, not as a victim, but as a woman who fought to reclaim her story, and I will not be the last." The fallout was swift. News stations exploded with the revelations. Project Echo, the falsified deaths, the psychological manipulation of multiple women. Zariah's photo ran beside Lena's two faces, split by time, united by truth. Trent's name was stripped from foundations, tech boards, and university endowments overnight. He had survived the warehouse fire, burned arrested, and now awaiting federal charges without bail. Cole watched the headlines with unreadable eyes. "He won't walk away this time," Zariah whispered beside him. Cole didn't answer. Instead, he pulled her hand into his lap and kissed her knuckles. She felt the tremble behind his calm, offering her strength without saying more. Lena moved into a small cottage owned by Agatha, nestled in the hills outside the city. For weeks, she barely left. But one afternoon she showed up at Zariah's apartment with a pot of tea and a folder. "What's this?" Zariah asked. Lena sat down, smoothing the papers with care. "My story. Written. Complete. I want to publish it under my name at this time." Zariah blinked. "You're ready." Lena smiled, fragile but firm. "I'm not ready, but I'm doing it anyway." Zariah wrapped her arms around her, the hug tight with shared pain and quiet triumph. Zariah turned down interview offers, book deals, and magazine spreads in the following weeks. She needed air, time, stillness. So she went away. Not far. Just north to a cabin near the lake Cole had once taken her to after the first escape. The trees still whispered. The water still glimmered. But this time, she brought nothing to run from, only something to walk toward. Cole joined her 2 days later. He arrived with a backpack, a scar healing clean across his collarbone, and eyes that had seen too much fire and still held light. They didn't speak much that first night. They didn't need to. He held her beneath the stars, her head on his chest, and when he whispered, "You're safe," it no longer sounded like a promise. It sounded like a home. One afternoon, as snow melted into spring, Zariah sat by the window, a pen in hand, a new notebook open. She began to write not the story of Trent, the escape, or even the trauma, but the story of a woman who burned and bloomed, of love found not in rescue, but in recognition. Cole watched her from the kitchen, a mug in hand, a soft smile on his lips. "What's it about?" he asked. She paused, looked up. "It's about a girl who thought she needed to be saved until she realized she was the one holding the match." He crossed the room, set the mug down, and kissed her gently. "And how does it end?" Zariah leaned into him. "It doesn't." Back in the city, Tasha returned to her classes. She was different now, quieter, sharper, more certain. One evening, she sent Zariah a photo of a tattoo on her ribcage, a small flame with the words, "Never caged again." Zariah smiled for a long time. When the trial began, Zariah testified. She stood before a courtroom packed with reporters and strangers, and when Trent was wheeled in, his face-scarred expression still smug, she didn't flinch. She looked him in the eyes and said, "You mistook obsession for intimacy, control for care. But I was never yours to design." He said nothing. His silence was the last weapon he ever held. When the verdict came guilty on all counts, Zariah stood in the hallway, the sun pouring through the courthouse glass. Cole wrapped an arm around her waist, his other hand laced with hers. "Are you okay?" he asked. She turned, resting her forehead against his. "No," she said, "but I'm free." He smiled. "That's enough for today. And tomorrow." He kissed her temple. "We build." Spring did not announce itself loudly. It arrived quietly at the cabin, through the unfurling of leaves, the thawing of riverbanks, the song of birds that had forgotten winter. Zariah opened the window each morning to listen, cup of tea in hand, heart steady in a way it had never been. Healing was not linear. It never had been. But for once, the path didn't feel jagged. It felt chosen. Cole moved through the space with the comfort of someone who knew how to make room without taking it. He cooked breakfast before she woke, chopped firewood with sleeves rolled to his elbows, and built shelves she hadn't asked for. He rarely talked about the past unless she did. He never looked away when she did. They spent long evenings reading by the fire or walking along the water's edge. Sometimes they spoke in whispers, other times not at all. And in that silence, Zariah began to trust something she hadn't dared believe in before. Peace didn't have to be earned through pain. It could be accepted as enough. The day she decided to return to Chicago was the first time she wore red again. Not the red dress that had once made her a symbol inside a Predators game, but a loose linen sundress, soft and bright. She caught Cole watching her as she stepped out of the bedroom. He tilted his head. "You look like something that should be painted." She smiled, "Not framed." He crossed the room and took her hand. "Only if you hang next to me." Back in the city, the press had quieted. The trial ended, but Zariah's name still floated through articles, panel discussions, and classrooms. Women sent letters, some anonymous, others pages long, thanking her not just for exposing Trent, but for showing how one survives without surrendering identity. She read everyone. Lena's memoir was in pre-publication. Tasha had been offered an internship with a firm specializing in trauma-informed legal defense. Agatha had started hosting a support group for women who had lost their voices inside beautiful cages. And Zariah. She began teaching. Not journalism, not survival, but storytelling. She called the class Writing the Self Back In. On the first warm night in June, Cole surprised her. He led her through the garden of Agatha's home, now lush with climbing roses and wild chamomile, and stopped beneath a string of golden lights. The entire place glowed. Soft music drifted from hidden speakers. A table was set with candles and linen, and a white rose was in the center. Zariah blinked. "Cole." He took both her hands. "You once said you weren't ready to be saved, that you were the one holding the match." She nodded, breath catching. He smiled. "I'm not asking to save you. I'm asking to stand in the fire with you every day for the rest of our lives." Her vision blurred. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. No velvet, no diamonds, just a simple gold band shaped like a flame. "Marry me." She didn't answer with words. She said yes with her whole body, throwing her arms around him, whispering yes against his neck, mouth, and breath. Yes, not because she needed to be held, but because she had chosen the hands that would. Their wedding was small. A few months later, under the same string lights, Tasha stood beside her, and Marcus, grudgingly in a suit, stood guard at the gate. Agatha officiated, her voice warm and firm. "You do not owe your past to your future," she said. "You owe your future to your truth." Zariah looked into Cole's eyes and saw no rescue. Only love. Only home. They honeymooned in a small town along the Pacific coast. Mornings were quiet, filled with salt air and the slow stretch of time. In the afternoons they hiked or sketched, or sat with their feet in the surf, letting waves erase every footprint. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Zarya touched her belly. She hadn't told him yet. She waited until they were wrapped in blankets, firelight flickering. She said slowly that someone else might join us soon. Cole froze. Then he reached for her, both hands cradling her face. "You," she nodded, lips trembling. "Me, and him, and them." And the story they had only just begun. Months later, in their new home, a warm, sunlit apartment filled with books and secondhand furniture, Zariah placed a framed photo on the mantel. It was a picture from their wedding. Not the posed one, the candid one, where she and Cole were laughing, heads thrown back, eyes locked on each other like nothing else existed. She looked at it for a long time, then turned back to her desk, picked up her pen, and wrote the dedication for her first book. "For the man I loved, for the woman I became, and for every heart that refuses to be designed." The title, embossed in gold, read, "The Light We Choose."